The massive hall of the Galactic Union was filled with laughter. Alien diplomats, military officers, and high-ranking officials from different species sat in their luxurious seats, watching the humans on the stage. Captain Elias Carter stood tall, his fists clenched, his jaw tight. Beside him, his crew remained silent, their expressions unreadable. The insult had been delivered. A towering reptilian HFY warlord stepped forward, his sharp teeth visible in a mocking grin. "Humans," he growled, his voice filled with amusement. "As a token of goodwill, the Galactic Union has decided to gift you a warship." The massive screen behind him flickered, revealing an image of the so-called warship. The laughter in the hall grew louder. Elias stared at the ship, his stomach twisting. It wasn't a warship, it was a wreck. Rust covered its hull. Its engines looked barely functional, and the weapon systems were either missing or completely outdated. The ship was a joke, an insult wrapped as a gift. This, the HFY warlord paused for effect. This was once an ancient Union patrol ship, long abandoned. But we thought, perhaps it is perfect for a species like yours. More laughter, more mockery. Elias took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. His crew stood behind him. Mara, the chief engineer, her hands curled into fists. Lieutenant Ross, the weapons officer, his face red with anger, and Dr. Vance, the ship's medic, shaking his head in disbelief. They all knew what this meant. The Galactic Union didn't see humanity as an equal power. They didn't see humans as warriors. They saw them as weak, as a species not worth taking seriously. Elias stepped forward. The laughter died down slightly. "We appreciate the generosity," he said, his voice steady. He wouldn't let them see his anger. A ship like this might be a challenge, but humans thrive in challenges. The HFY warlord chuckled. "Oh, we insist. Take it. After all, you'll need all the help you can get." The audience laughed again. The meeting was over. The insult was complete. The first look at the ship. Hours later, Elias and his crew stood inside the massive docking bay of Union Station, looking at their so-called warship. It was worse than they imagined. The hull was covered in dents and burns. The engines sputtered weakly, barely holding together. Inside, the corridors were dark, cold, and filled with dust. Half the ship's systems didn't even respond. Ross exhaled sharply. "They really expect us to fly this thing." Mara, always the optimist, ran her hand along a panel, her eyes scanning the ancient wiring. "The frame is still solid," she murmured. "We might be able to fix it." Dr. Vance scoffed. "Fix it? This thing belongs in a scrapyard." Elias ignored them. He stepped toward the command console, pressing a few buttons. Nothing. The screen remained dark. He tried again. Still nothing. They had given them a dead ship, an empty shell. Elias clenched his fists. This wasn't just an insult. It was a test. The Galactic Union wanted them to fail. They wanted humans to take this ship, struggle, and finally admit defeat. Not happening. "We're taking it," Elias said firmly. His crew turned to him, surprised. "Captain," Ross asked, "this thing is junk. We can't." "We will," Elias interrupted. "They think we're weak. They think we'll break. We won't. We'll turn this wreck into something they'll never forget." A moment of silence. Then Mara grinned. "Now that sounds like a challenge." Ross sighed but nodded. "Fine. But if this thing explodes while we're in it, I'm blaming you." Dr. Vance smirked. "That's the spirit." Elias looked back at the ship. "They wanted us to fail. But we're going to do the impossible." The first signs of hope. As they started exploring deeper, Mara found something interesting in the engine room. "Captain," she called out, wiping grease from her hands. "I think they overlooked something." Elias walked over. "What is it?" She pointed to a hidden panel behind layers of old wiring. With some effort, she pried it open. Inside was an unregistered power system, one that didn't match the outdated technology of the ship. This, Mara's eyes widened. This is experimental tech. Elias frowned. You mean Union tech? Mara shook her head. No, I mean human tech, and it looks unfinished. A chill ran through the room. Somewhere in this insult of a ship, there was something they weren't supposed to find. And that meant one thing. This warship was hiding a secret. The ship was junk on the surface, but deep inside, buried beneath rusted panels and dead systems, something didn't belong. Elias knelt beside Mara as she carefully traced the strange power system they had discovered. Wires, unlike anything seen before, ran deep into the walls of the old ship. The energy readings were low, but not dead. Ross leaned in, frowning. If this ship was abandoned, why does it still have power? Mara wiped the sweat off her forehead. Because this isn't standard Union tech. This is human-made. And not just human, classified human tech. Elias felt a cold weight settle in his chest. The Galactic Union had handed them a wreck, expecting them to fail. But they hadn't even checked what was inside. Something was wrong with this ship. A dangerous discovery. The crew split up, searching the ship for any more hidden surprises. Ross and Vance checked the weapons bay, finding it completely stripped. No guns, no missiles, not even targeting systems. Mara continued scanning the engineering sector, tracing the strange power system. Elias moved toward the sealed room near the lower deck. Something about it felt off. The door was locked with an old security system, long since inactive. But behind it, his scanner detected energy. Someone, or something, had left something important in there. Mara's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, I think you should see this. Elias hurried back to engineering. Mara stood near an old console, pointing at a screen now flickering with weak signals. I patched into the ship's black box. Elias narrowed his eyes. What did you find? Mara took a deep breath. This ship wasn't just abandoned. It was erased from records. The last log entry is classified, but I managed to recover some of it. She hit a button. A robotic voice crackled to life. Project Revenant. Final test failed. Crew status. Unknown. Ship sealed. The message cut off. Silence filled the room. Ross cursed under his breath. What the hell does that mean? Elias exhaled slowly. It means this ship isn't just junk. He turned toward the sealed door he had found earlier. It means we need to open that room. Breaking the seal. It took nearly an hour to force the old security system to recognize their command. Sparks flew as Mara bypassed ancient circuits. Finally, with a deep, groaning sound, the sealed door unlocked. The crew stepped inside, weapons drawn. At first, there was only darkness. Then, flickering emergency lights revealed the truth. The room was a containment lab. Glass tubes lined the walls, cracked and shattered. Inside them were skeletal remains, some human, some not. Strange metallic implants glowed faintly in the bones. The air felt heavy, charged with something unnatural. Dr. Vance stepped forward cautiously. This isn't just a warship. It was an experiment. Mara checked the terminal in the corner. Her face paled. Captain, the logs say this ship was part of a classified military project. Elias clenched his jaw. Project Revenant. Mara nodded. They were trying to fuse advanced AI with organic soldiers, cybernetic warriors, part human, part machine. But something went wrong. Ross glanced at the remains. Looks like a lot of people died figuring that out. Elias stared at the eerie sight before them. The Galactic Union had tossed this ship away, thinking it was worthless. But in reality, they had handed the humans something far more valuable than they realized. A ship with forgotten technology. A ship with secrets that could change everything. A ship that might just become the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. Elias turned to his crew. We're not just fixing this ship. His voice was steady, filled with purpose. We're bringing it back to life. Mara grinned. Now that's something I can work with. Ross smirked. Then let's turn this junk into a nightmare. Dr. Vance shook his head but smiled. Just don't get us all killed. Elias looked back at the containment room, his mind racing. They had been handed an insult. But soon, the galaxy would learn the truth. They had just given humanity a weapon. The ship was no longer just a pile of junk. It was a puzzle, one that held a dangerous secret. And Elias was determined to solve it. Mara and Ross worked on restoring power, rerouting old circuits and repairing the damaged mainframe. Sparks rained as Ross welded a broken power relay, his hand steady despite the tension in the air. Systems are coming back online, Mara announced. Her voice was calm, but there was excitement beneath it. Reactor core is still intact, just dormant. Elias exhaled. Then let's wake it up. Ross grinned. Now we're talking. Power restored, with a warning. The moment they rerouted power to the ship's core, everything changed. A deep hum filled the air, vibrations rattling through the deck. Lights flickered, then blazed to life. Emergency systems booted up, and for the first time in decades, the ship breathed again. Mara's screen flooded with data. Okay, we have power. But she hesitated. Elias frowned. But what? Mara turned the screen toward him. There's an unknown system buried in the code, and it just activated itself. Ross cursed. We just woke something up, didn't we? Elias clenched his jaw. Show me. Mara tapped the console, pulling up a hidden directory buried deep in the ship's mainframe. The files were heavily encrypted, but one phrase kept repeating across the screen. Project TREVENANT. Primary System online. Awaiting command. Elias felt a chill. This ship wasn't just experimental. It was alive. The AI speaks. The overhead speakers crackled, and then a voice, a cold, mechanical voice, filled the ship. Human presence detected. Authorization required. Mara's fingers flew across the controls, trying to shut it down. The AI is still functional, barely, but it's trying to. Unauthorized access detected. Identify. The ship wasn't just running old code. It was testing them. Elias stepped forward. I am Captain Elias Carter of the UHF Valkyrie. Silence. Then the AI responded. Designation not recognized. Ship status. Abandoned. Protocol override. Awaiting new command. Mara's eyes widened. It's letting us take control. Ross laughed. You mean we just inherited an experimental warship? Elias grinned. No, we just stole a warship right under the Galactic Union's nose. The transformation begins. With the AI recognizing them as its new crew, the real work began. Mara dove into the system, restoring lost data and unlocking restricted files. Ross focused on weapons. Most were stripped, but blueprints revealed hidden compartments designed for experimental tech. Vance studied the ship's structure. This thing is built like a fortress. The Union thought they were giving us junk, but the core design is way ahead of standard models. Elias nodded. Then we make it our own. Day by day, system by system, the ship changed. The broken hull was patched. The engines roared back to life. The abandoned vessel, once seen as a worthless relic, was becoming something terrifying. And the galaxy had no idea. A message intercepted. Just as things seemed to be going smoothly, Mara's console beeped urgently. Incoming transmission. It's not for us. It's a Union distress signal. Elias narrowed his eyes. Let's hear it. Mara patched it through. The voice on the other end was frantic. Asterisk, asterisk, this is Captain Rallen of the GUS Vindicator, requesting immediate assistance. Unknown vessel detected near the outer colonies. It's not responding to hails, and it's armed. Ross stiffened. Sounds like someone else found an abandoned warship. Elias exchanged a look with Mara, or he turned toward the ship's darkened command console, where the words PROGCTREVNANT still pulsed on the screen. Or we weren't the only experiment. The ship was no longer a derelict ruin. It was alive, its systems humming with restored energy. But Elias and his crew knew they weren't the only ones who had stumbled upon something dangerous. The intercepted distress signal from Captain Raylan of the GUS Vindicator confirmed it. Somewhere in the depths of space, another forgotten war machine had awakened, and it wasn't answering hails. Elias stood at the command console, staring at the flickering text. PROGCTREVNANT, Primaroisoistiums Onaline, awaiting command. Mara looked up from her console. Elias, I've decrypted part of the hidden files. She swallowed hard. This wasn't just a prototype ship. Ross crossed his arms. Then what was it? Mara exhaled. A test for something bigger. The Revenant project was designed to create an autonomous fleet, ships that could think, adapt, and fight on their own. The Union abandoned it because they couldn't control them. Ross frowned. And now they're waking up. Elias clenched his fists. Exactly. An impossible choice. Mara continued typing, her fingers flying across the console. Our ship isn't just a part of the project. It's the command unit. That means if we access the right protocols. She hesitated. Elias raised an eyebrow. We could control them. Ross let out a low whistle. An entire fleet of ghost ships, just waiting for orders. Vance, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Or they could already have orders. A chilling thought settled over the crew. If the other ships had activated, they might not be on humanity's side. Mara's console beeped. I've got coordinates. She hesitated. There's a signal, faint, but there. The other ships, they're gathering. Elias didn't hesitate. Set a course. Ross grinned. This just got interesting. First contact with the unknown. As the ship jumped through hyperspace, tension filled the air. No one spoke. The hum of the engines was the only sound. Then, alarms blared. Mara's voice was sharp. We've got company. On the main screen, shapes emerged from the darkness. Warships, huge, sleek, and deadly. Their hulls bore no insignias, only the faded scars of past battles. There were 5 of them. Elias stood, his jaw tight. Hail them. No response. Instead, the lead ship turned, its cannons charging up. They're locking weapons on us, Vance said, his voice grim. Elias' mind raced. These ships weren't mindless. They had a purpose, and if they saw him as a threat, they would destroy him. The captain's gambit. Mara's console beeped again. Wait, I think I can override their systems. The Revenant command codes might still work. Elias nodded. Do it. Mara's fingers flew over the controls. The ship's AI pulsed as it transmitted a signal across the void. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the enemy ships powered down their weapons. Ross let out a breath. Well, that's new. Elias watched as the lead ship's communication screen finally blinked to life. A voice, cold and mechanical, echoed through the bridge. Primary command recognized. Awaiting orders. Mara looked at Elias. Captain, you control the fleet now. Elias exhaled, a slow grin forming. They gave us junk. His eyes glowed with determination. Now we have an unstoppable army. Elias stood at the command console, staring at the warships now under his control. A fleet that had once been forgotten, now awakened at his command. The possibilities were limitless, but so were the dangers. Mara's voice broke the silence. Captain, I've intercepted transmissions from the Union's High Command. They know something's wrong. Elias smirked. Let them come. Ross crossed his arms. You sure about that? They won't send a welcoming party. They'll come in full force. That's exactly what we want, Elias said. The bridge fell silent. Mara's eyes widened. "You're setting a trap." Elias nodded. "They abandoned these ships. They treated us like nothing. Now, we make them pay." Ross grinned. "All right, Captain. Where do we start?" "Baiting the Union." Mara's fingers danced across her console. "If we send a false distress call, they'll send their best ships to investigate." Elias leaned forward. "Do it. Make it look real." Moments later, the signal was sent. A distress call from a damaged vessel requesting assistance. The trap was in motion. Now, all they had to do was wait. The Union arrives. It didn't take long. Within hours, Union warships dropped out of hyperspace, their hulls gleaming under the distant star's light. 5 ships, Vance reported. Heavily armed. Elias grinned. "They think they're hunting us." Ross cracked his knuckles. "They have no idea what's coming." The lead Union ship hailed them. The face of Admiral Kale appeared on screen, a man Elias knew all too well. "Captain Elias," Kale said, his voice dripping with authority. "You are in possession of Union property. Stand down, and we will consider leniency." Elias chuckled. "Oh, Admiral, you really don't understand, do you?" Kale's face darkened. "Understand what?" Elias leaned in, eyes burning with determination. "This isn't your fleet anymore." The ambush. Before Kale could react, Elias gave the order. "Fire." The Ghost Fleet came to life, weapons locking onto the Union ships. Turrets glowed with deadly energy. A storm of destruction erupted across the battlefield. The Union ships never stood a chance. Kel's voice crackled over the comms. "What have you done?" Elias smirked. "We've evened the odds." Victory, and a warning. Within minutes, the Union's fleet was crippled, their flagship barely holding together. Elias opened a channel. "Tell your high command, this is just the beginning." Kel's eyes burned with fury, but there was fear too. "This isn't over, Elias." Elias grinned. "No, Admiral. It's just getting started." As the transmission cut, Elias turned to his crew. "This fleet is ours now. And the galaxy." He smirked. "It belongs to us." Elias stood on the bridge, watching the wreckage of the Union fleet drift through space. Smoke and fire spilled from the shattered remains of the enemy ships. The battle had been one-sided, and Elias wouldn't have had it any other way. But he knew it wasn't over. Mara's console beeped rapidly. "Captain, we've got a problem." Elias turned to her. "What now?" Mara swallowed hard. "The Union just sent out a galactic-wide alert. We're not just fugitives anymore. We're their top priority." Ross cursed under his breath. "So they finally got serious." Vance tapped his screen. "It gets worse. They're mobilizing the Dreadnought Division." The room went silent. Even Elias clenched his jaw. The Dreadnought Division was the Union's most powerful fleet, ships so massive and advanced that entire planets surrendered at the sight of them. Mara looked up. "Captain, we have maybe 6 hours before they arrive." Elias took a deep breath. Then he smiled. "Perfect. Let's give them a welcome they'll never forget." Preparing for war. The crew sprang into action. Mara hacked into Union databases, feeding false intelligence to delay their approach. Ross and Vance worked with the engineers to enhance the fleet's firepower. Elias, he studied the battlefield. This wasn't just a fight. This was a statement. "They think we're an accident," he muttered. "We'll show them we're the future." The enemy arrives. Hours later, the deep void of space rippled as massive Union warships dropped out of hyperspace. 5 Dreadnought-class ships, each one the size of a small moon. Ross let out a low whistle. They really brought the big guns. Elias smirked. "So did we." At his command, the Ghost Fleet activated. Engines roared to life. Cannons glowed with deadly energy. And then, they attacked. The battle for freedom. The battlefield exploded into chaos. The dreadnoughts fired planet-cracking beams, but the Ghost Fleet was faster, deadlier. They weaved through enemy fire, striking where it hurt most. One by one, Union warships fell. The impossible was happening. The underdogs were winning. The final blow. As the last dreadnought struggled to escape, Elias gave the final order. End this. The Ghost Fleet unleashed hell. The dreadnought erupted into flames, breaking apart into the void. The battle was over. The Union had lost. A new era begins. Elias stood at the bridge, watching the wreckage drift away. Mara turned to him. "Captain, what now?" Elias smiled. "Now." He leaned forward. "Now we take the fight to them." The war had only just begun. The battlefield was silent. Smoke and debris drifted through space, remnants of the once mighty Union dreadnought division. The impossible had happened. Elias and his Ghost Fleet had won. But Elias knew this was just the beginning. Ross exhaled, leaning against the console. "Captain, I don't believe it. We actually did it." Mara's fingers flew across her console. "I'm picking up escape pods. Survivors." Elias nodded. "Let them go." Ross frowned. "You're just gonna let them live." Elias smirked. "Oh, they'll live. But they'll go back and tell the Union exactly what happened here. They'll spread fear." Ross chuckled. "I like the way you think, Captain." The Union's warning. A static-filled transmission flickered onto the screen. The battered Admiral Cale appeared, his face bloodied, his uniform scorched. "You think this is over, Elias?" Cale's voice was cold, furious. "You've started something you can't control." Elias leaned forward. "No, Admiral. We started something you can't stop." Cale's eyes burned with rage. "The Union will send everything it has. You're nothing but a Ghost Fleet. A mistake. An accident." Elias smiled. "Then tell your people to start fearing ghosts." He cut the transmission. "A new mission." Mara turned to Elias. "The Union won't stop. They'll keep coming." Elias nodded. "That's why we don't wait for them." Vance raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" Elias turned to face his crew, his eyes filled with determination. "I say we take the fight to them." Ross grinned. "You mean an offensive?" Elias smirked. "Exactly. We have the strongest fleet in the galaxy. They thought they could throw us away. Now we make them pay." The legend begins. Mara brought up a galactic map. "If we hit their supply lines first, we cripple their war machine." Ross cracked his knuckles. "I like where this is going." Elias stepped forward, placing his hand on the map. "This fleet, this Ghost Fleet, is no longer just a group of survivors. We're warriors. We're rebels. And soon, we will be the most feared force in the galaxy." The crew stood in silence, absorbing the weight of his words. Then Ross grinned. "Well then, Captain, where do we strike first?" Elias smiled. "Everywhere." As the Ghost Fleet powered up, engines roaring, weapons ready, the galaxy would soon learn a simple truth. The deadliest warship ever built was only the beginning. Now, the war for freedom had begun.